Coming up on Face the State, we're seeing some big changes to Nevada's population. Hear from Nevada's resident expert, our state demographer, about what that means and what our state could look like in the future. Then, American troops have been fighting in Afghanistan for more than a decade, and one of my Coming up on Face the State, we're seeing some big changes to Nevada's population. Hear from Nevada's resident expert, our state demographer, about what that means and what our state could look like in the future. Then, American troops have been fighting in Afghanistan for more than a decade, and one of my guests learned English to help them. Hear his story when Face the State starts right after the break. Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for being with us. Well, you may not know this office exists, but inside the Nevada Department of Taxation is the State Demographer's Office, tasked with keeping track of Nevada's population changes. And right now, as you can imagine, is a very interesting time to be in that office. Nevada State Demographer Jeff Hardcastle is here to talk about that with us. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll get started with just talking about what exactly the State Demographer is.
The State Demographer for Nevada does annual population estimates for the cities and towns and the counties, as well as population projections going out 20 years. Also looking at age, sex, race, and Hispanic origin estimates and projections. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but it's what, the whole breakdown of the population.
And it's an important job, because that's kind of how we figure out where tax dollars are coming from and where they're going, right?
The estimates are used in distributing the C-tax revenues back to the cities and towns. The estimates that the federal government produces, which I'm also involved with, as well as the census, those are used in federal funding formulas. With the Census Bureau, we've worked on programs that have helped bring money back into Nevada, actually.
Well, right, because, it's easy for different, especially certain sectors of the population to slip through the cracks. So the more accurate an estimate we can get, the more accurate the amount of money, the allocated money they'll get.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's talk about what's happening in Nevada's population right now.
Well, right now we're at about 2,850,000. Last year, nationally, we were the second fastest growing state in the country, just past South Dakota. But if you look at an actual levels of population change, we were 13th, just ahead of Oregon and Utah. That compares back to the previous decade, the 2000 to 2004 period, for instance, for a 4-year span. That was about 380,000. This past year, 4 years, we saw 138,000. So we're not growing as fast as we did in the last decade, but we're still growing. We kind of bottomed out at our lowest point back between 2000 and 2011 with only about a 16,000 person increase. This past year, set of estimates from 13 to 14, we grew by 42,000.
Wow. I mean, that seems like a lot more people to have in the state. Is it not?
Years back, I worked for Clark County, and I used to joke that Nevada is one of the few places a 3% growth rate would be considered a recession. That was in the days that, there were 50,000 people moving in net, because there's always people moving in, people moving out.
Now, in the recession, did we see a population shift compared to what we're seeing now that we've kind of climbed out of the recession?
We're seeing a return of I think, more sustained growth. Statistically, if you look at, because estimates are just that, they're estimates, and there's some room for error. But from 2009, 10, 11, we were relatively flat. If we had any real out-migration, it was probably between 2009 and 2010. And statewide, that was about 10,000 people.
Okay, and is it happening fairly consistently across the state, or is it more so in the bigger counties?
Washoe and Clark continue to be the big leaders in population. The rural counties, especially with the mining economies, with the boom and bust, they've been bouncing around with that boom and bust economies and not showing solid gains. The surrounding area around Washoe County, with the recession impacts from like Lyon County and Douglas County to some extent, have slowed down their growth, and they've had some out migration over time too, loss in population. But we're a little bit more back to, I think, a sustained trajectory for this Northwest region.
Okay, what about projections? I know that there are a lot of different factors that kind of predict population changes. What do you guys see happening over the next year, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, the model I use to do the population projections for Nevada is an econometric model that looks at both demographic components and economic components. So it's looking at the interaction of wages and the attraction of the community for bringing people in, as well as comparing it to other counties in Nevada, as well as to the nation as a whole. And with that, we're looking at, for 20 years out, population increase statewide of about 490,000. And for the 5-county region, that Washoe County, Story, Douglas, Lyon, and Carson City, 150,000. For Washoe County, 130,000. That was without Tesla coming in.
Wow, that's a huge change without Tesla?
And that's over 20 years, though, keep in mind, too. Prior to the recession, prior to that 2006 period, there was a lot of optimism in the air, even though things were changing. Mm-hmm. And we were looking at projecting an increase of 1 million statewide over 20 years. So as this economy continues to rebalance and become, some shifts going on with rebalancing, this idea of the new normal, we continue to see a ratcheting down that long-term growth, potentially.
What about with Tesla? What kind of changes do you think Tesla is going to bring on top of all that?
Tesla's going to bring about to the region about 33,000 people on top of that. For the 5-county region, for Washoe County itself, about 18,000. Most of that growth will happen by 2023.
Is this viewed as a mostly positive thing, or are there problems that come along with this?
Well, the region was growing incrementally to begin with. That idea of kind of, some people are talking about it as being natural growth, but it brings the benefit of solidifying the industrial manufacturing base for the region. It moves us to where we have a solid manufacturing base. The issues are going to be, how do we fund schools, roads, those kinds of things, and those are more for policy decision makers to decide and discuss. But it will have some impact, but some of those impacts were already baked in with the growth we're already seeing.
Okay, now real quickly, do we have any idea who these additional people are? I mean, are they coming in from other states? Is the birth rate increasing? Are they coming from other countries? The birth rate is actually decreasing overall, even among Hispanics, and that's not just a Nevada trend, that's a national trend. But what we're having is a larger pool of women of childbearing age.
And, but you also still see net in-migration from some states. California for net in-migration because, like I say, people move and come in. But last year, or actually 2014, it was about 18,000 net moved in from California, about 3,500 from Hawaii. But yet we also lost people. We lost about 5,000 to Arizona and about 4,500 to Texas.
So does it kind of balance out, or
we still were a net gain for total net migration when you distribute that across all 50 states. But what's interesting is our net out almost equaled our net in from California.
Okay, well, we have just about a few minutes left, but I do want to touch on, do we have any idea about gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, about the new people coming into Nevada?
The new people coming into Nevada, at least in the near term, have been still, overall, it's been almost statistically across all groups a net wash. So you're seeing no real jump on age groups. For Washoe County, though, we've seen an uptick on senior migration, people over 65 particularly. And also in the college age population the past 3 years especially. Prior to 2011, it was almost flat or a little bit loss on the college age population.
Okay, and we don't have any idea about ethnicity,
ethnicity, we're growing on the Hispanic population, and that's about a third is people that moved here probably prior to 2010. If you look at the census data, about a third are probably been born here in that period from 2000 to 2010. Another third have moved here. And the other thing, though, that is happening in Nevada that needs to be kept in mind is we are an aging state. Except for the I-80 corridor and Washoe and Clark, the other counties are aging actually much faster than the rest of the country. And that causes some policy issues down the road, too.
Absolutely. Okay, Jeff Hardcastle, State Demographer,
thank you very much,
thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Coming up on Face the State, my next guest was born in Afghanistan, witnessed the country's brutal civil war, and takeover by the Taliban, all before he came to live here in Reno. Hear his amazing story right after the break. Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, Afghanistan has been an embattled nation for nearly all of recent history, from civil wars and Taliban control to foreign occupation. Our guest tonight saw much of that firsthand, even helping translate for U.S. forces there. Amal Halim is here to tell us about his experiences. Amal, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, your story, for Americans at least, is kind of an unusual one, isn't it? I mean, or is it, you think, pretty representative of a lot of people over there?
Well, I think it's unusual because, you don't see a lot of interpreters, getting an opportunity like I, did. They do come through SIV, which is a special immigrant visas. With, they do have a lot of issues. They issue very little number of issues, visas to the Afghan translator there. But what I had was just pretty unique because I came through a student visa. That was the only way to get out of Afghanistan, and I was very fortunate to meet an amazing Army commander who happened to sponsor my education and help me in so many ways that I can't even explain.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in just a moment, but first, tell me what it was like growing up in Afghanistan.
It's obviously very, very hard. My story is representing the whole nation in that country because, just like you said in your introduction, Afghanistan is a country where it is in war for the last, I would say, 35 years. I lost my father when I was only 6 months old against the Soviet Union, and in a country like Afghanistan, where when you lose your father, then the son kind of become the breadwinner for the family. So I start supporting my family since I was like 7 years old to this day, because my mom and sister they didn't have education and they couldn't go even outside their house to kind of take care of the family. So when the Soviet Union left Afghanistan in 1989, over I would say 2 million people were killed and many were injured because of the 10 years conflict over there, and a lot of widows, a lot of orphans, and it was a desperate situation over there. So it is hard to live in that country, especially with the poverty and a lot of war and conflict. It is changing, by the way, in the last 10 years, but it's still very hard to live there because a lot of children are deprived from just basic rights that we have here in America.
Right. I mean, and then, the Soviet Union left and then the Taliban came in. What was that change like?
It was Afghanistan is a historical country if you look at the war, because when the Soviet Union left Afghanistan, then the people's hope was very, very high. We thought, I was born in 1989. I was, they left that year when I was born, so I don't really remember any of them. But my mom is telling me and my uncles are telling me, when they left Afghanistan, we had very high hopes for the bright future in that country. But then unfortunately, we had these 7 leaders, this freedom fighters. They turned their gun on each other, and everybody want to rule Afghanistan, and that's why they couldn't agree on one government. And Taliban saw that as a good opportunity for them. They came as a very little small number of people, just religious students, and one of the leader, Mullah Muhammad Umar, they saw Afghanistan as a very divided and weak nation, so they basically came and took over, and that's how it went, and the 9/11 of course happened. So
was it difficult growing up in that environment? I mean, I imagine it couldn't have been easy.
I think that was probably I tell people, the hardest term in Afghanistan, the hardest period in Afghanistan history, because you have the Soviet Union, they killed a lot of people, there is a lot of brutality and that, but then when there was the civil war, again, the 7 leaders who couldn't agree on one government, they killed and destroyed Afghanistan as much as they could. And then the Taliban came. The first year or second year, people were looking for a change. That's why they kind of welcomed the Taliban at the beginning. People thought like, okay, they will be the savior of the country. They were kind of nice at the beginning. Honestly, the second year they were much nicer. There was peace. They thought that they would save Afghanistan, the women, the children, but then we saw their real face, which were so brutal. I mean, you couldn't own a TV. You could be jailed if you own a TV. You couldn't shave a beard. You could go to jail for years if you shave a beard. You couldn't even walk with your mother or sister outside your country unless you prove to them like, hey, this is my mother or sister, and I need to take them outside, either for a doctor or whatever. It was the darkest days, I should say, in Afghanistan history, and especially for women, because they couldn't even go outside their house. No education for them, no public service for them, no government jobs for them. They were totally deprived and kept in house by their power for the whole time they were in power in Afghanistan.
So at what point did you make the decision that you wanted to learn English and be an interpreter to help the United States?
That was kind of probably random. It wasn't planned, and it kind of go back to the poverty there. I was very, very poor. I was desperately looking for a job to take care of my family. My mother brothers, my uncles, they helped me when I was little. They helped me the way they could, but they weren't very rich either. So when I was going to school, in the same time I was taking care of my family, and then I would go and sit in a coffee shop or tea shop, and because when 9/11 happened, Americans came to Afghanistan. They brought TVs, and people had they would watch American movies, and I would also go and sit in a corner of shop and watch American movies, and that's how I pick up the slangs in the language. And when I graduated, I wanted to pursue my higher education, which was one of my higher dream, but I couldn't do that because I had to take care of my mom and sister. So, one of my uncle who were actually dealing with Americans as a bazaar vendor, he was selling stuff to them. He asked me if I could go and help him, and I said sure. So I went with him, and I interacted with this American officer. He offered me a job, and I took it because I was desperately looking for a job. I didn't tell my mom that I'm actually working for Americans because she would be devastated if anything happened to me. That wasn't an easy job, but I explained to her afterward, and when I told them where the Americans were, why the Americans were there in Afghanistan, what were they actually doing, and I saw that with my own eyes, she was absolutely amazed because I came from a very veteran family. Like I said, I lost my father, my uncles. So much of my people from our tribe against the Soviet Union. You come from a very conservative, devout Muslim family where you don't like foreigners. But when I actually got the job and interacted with Americans, they were totally, different than the Russians, and they were totally different there in Afghanistan, and that's why my mom let me to work with them.
And you worked with them for about 3 years?
Yeah.
What types of missions did you go on?
I wouldn't be able to get into like the real details,
Right.
as you know, but some of the missions were, we were going to, especially my first 22 months, we would go and see the governor, we would go and see the chief of the police. We were actually, I was working for a team, PMT, police mentor team. We were there to train the Afghan police forces, and we would train them, with like how to fight against the enemy, and the safe range, and also train them if there was like a protest or a mob, how can you basically fight against that or stop that from without being so abusive or killing people. So we trained them with that tactics, and there was a lot of tough times we had. I did go on a lot of combat missions where, like I said, I won't be able to get into details, but there was definitely some good times and very, very tough times where I won't be able to talk about that.
Right, I can imagine. What would you say the overall sentiment toward Americans is in Afghanistan now, and how it was, when you were still living there?
I think it's changing, unfortunately, because the first year, especially the first 6 or 7 years, till 2007, they were perceived very positively in Afghanistan. And when I'm going to start from the beginning, when 9/11 happened, again, people were looking for a change. And when the Americans came, they were welcomed, by people. People were dancing in the street. We were liberated. Some people call it like, well, it was a war, against, against the Taliban. It was a war, but for the Afghanistan people, it was a liberation. It was, something that, we were hoping for. And when they came, they brought that, especially the first 6 and 7 years, there was much improvement. There was, much development in terms of infrastructure. You have 6 million girls going to school again. We have our parliament, 30% of our parliament percentage are women. We had a woman who ran for president. She came third, almost won the election. You have some major. Almost everyone has a phone, if not iPhones over there. You're talking about the Wi-Fi. You're talking about I can go on and on. So much things happen in that country. After 2007 and 8. You see the Taliban re-emerging back. You see kind of the distrust, the mistrust, I should say, between the Afghan government and the people, and then you also see, kind of America, not doing very well with President Karzai. That's kind of political things that's happening. I don't know, behind the scene, where that's more probably something beyond my knowledge. But I should say the President Karzai relationship was much better with President Bush than President Obama, and that's also led to a lot of misconception, misunderstanding, and a lot of mistrust between the two governments.
How about now? Do you still have family living there?
I do.
I think so. What do you hear from them about how the country feels about the United States now?
I would say that over 70%. If you talk to the people, they're very, very appreciative, and that's one thing that it doesn't get a lot of media coverage. If you talk to the normal people, they're just so appreciative of the American people, the American government, the things they have done. They sacrificed so many people over there. They spend billions of dollars in Afghanistan. They were the one that brought freedom to that country, and because of the Americans and other international allies, our flag is raising in a lot of countries right now. We have embassies. People didn't know Afghanistan before, and now we have embassies all over the world. We sit in the United Nations. We talk about the human rights over there. There are so much things done to talk about. The only thing I will kind of discuss right here is that people are kind of disappointed with the money that were allocated to Afghanistan by this government, and they were not spent properly, I should say. And again, some of them, come again with the American government, not kind of holding Afghans responsible. And most of it, I should say, the majority of it was the Afghanistan government, the warlords in their corruption. We had an amazing chance, or I should say golden opportunity, if the Afghanistan government was able to spend half of that money that America have given to Afghanistan. Afghanistan would be the Tokyo, I should say the Japan of today. So that's why some of the people are disappointed what really happened over there.
Okay. Well, switching gears a little bit, you came to Reno to go to the University of Nevada. What was that like for you culturally, going from there to here?
You know, honestly, of course, it's a very different culture. You know, like I said, you come from a, you know, devout Muslim country and live in a very, I should say, democratic country, which is a great thing. You know, in terms of weather in the, you know, the desert, in the mountains, if you go to Kabul and basically, as an American, if you go to Kabul, just like I had some of the soldiers, you know, you go over there, you see the mountain, the desert, you know, then you say, well, this look like Nevada, 90% like Nevada. And just the same thing happened to me when I came. I wasn't, you know, feeling very homesick because of, you know, when I saw the weather and the four season, you know, in the snow, the mountains, you know, the trails, and it reminded me of my, you know, home country. It's very, very nice here.
Oh, that's so interesting. But I mean, I'm sure that was maybe the only similarity.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned some differences earlier. Was the adaptation hard? You seem to have adapted just fine.
Yeah, I had the advantage of, if you talk to some of the Afghans who came strictly from, you know, Afghanistan over here, it's very, very hard for them to adapt. It takes about 5 to 10 years. But for me, it was really easy to adapt because I had the advantage of working with American troops. I know they speak very different than the local people over here. You know, of course, they have a different, you know, kind of attitude. You know, when you live in a base, you don't really feel the actual, like, living local. But when I come over here, people are very, very nice, very welcoming, and I receive, you know, so much, you know, respect for people, especially when they know that, you know, I have helped American troops, you know, in Afghanistan. And in terms of Walmart and having big stores and the highway, the freeway, oh, it's absolutely astonishing. It's amazing, you know, what we have over here compared to Afghanistan.
Now, you got your degree in political science.
That's correct.
What are you doing with that? What are you planning to do with that?
I study political science at UNR. I was a political consultant, or some people call it lobbyist, with Tom Clark, you know, in Carson City. So I was lobbyist this past legislation in Carson City. It was an amazing experience. And now I try to do more research in terms of a topic that I will be covering when I go to UK. I actually got an amazing scholarship thanks to Rotary International. They basically choose 50 people worldwide each year, you know, from different backgrounds, from different countries, and a lot of people compete in this program, and I was one of the 50 people to be chosen to study a master's degree in conflict resolution. So I will be heading to UK for my master's degree to the University of Bradford.
So conflict resolution, does that mean you have plans to go back to your home country?
Absolutely. You know, my dreams are to, you know, I already have my bachelor degree, and then I want to do my master's degree and then get some experience. And my ultimate goal is, I know it's not very peaceful over there. It's not very safe for someone like me or other interpreters who was affiliated with the Afghanistan government and with the US government. It's not very easy for us to just go back and just live there. But my ultimate goal is to go back to Afghanistan and help my country with any way I can.
All right, Amal, thank you so much. It's so interesting to hear your story. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now.
Thank you very much.
That is it for this episode of Face the State, but for more information or to see past episodes, just head to our website, ktvn.com. Thank you so much for being with us. We will see you next week.